I see a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to become more and more data-driven. Start small with some small proof of concepts, and there you probably don't need these fancy source control pipelines. When we came there, the CRO said, I'm just using my own Excel files, which the controls are providing me because I don't trust.
Evert Augustyns is a senior manager in data and analytics at TriFinance, bringing over a decade of experience turning complex business and finance data into clear, actionable insights.
It becomes a little bit more complex when you actually start with data that a lot of users are entering.
We want to do it immediately because it has the flexibility of drag and dropping and drilling. You can make very nice P&L visuals with it as well. I think it's always better to just start without governance than...
Hello everyone. Have you ever opened your Power BI workspace and realized it's starting to look like your old Excel folder? Reports everywhere. No one is sure about what numbers are right. Every team is building their own versions of the truth. Welcome to the Power BI Edge podcast. Today we're talking about something that's often overlooked when Power BI grows fast, which is governance. And to guide us through this, I'm today joined by Evert Augustyns, Senior Manager, Data and Analytics at the consulting company TriFinance in Belgium. Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction, Erik. Happy to walk you through some governance aspects that we already encountered during our Power BI projects over the last couple of years.
Before we get started, please tell us a little bit about yourself and about TriFinance.
So as you mentioned, we are indeed a consultant company, mainly based in Belgium, but not only in Belgium. We also have offices in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in Luxembourg. We're with plus minus 800 consultants right now, divided in two big groups, the transition and support group, which is mainly support of financial departments, for example, controllers for half a year, full year at different customers. And then another business unit where I'm part of, pragmatic advisory business unit, where we have different teams focusing really more in depth, let's say, on certain topics. And I'm part of the data analytics team, as you mentioned in the introduction. So that's a little bit how our organization is structured. With that data analytics team, we focus on the Microsoft stack, mainly being Power BI, but also Fabric, the data engineering components of Microsoft before Power BI. We're with a team of 25, and most of us, business/financial background, TriFinance, it's in the name. So a lot of us are coming from, let's say, the financial support unit, same like me, and we moved into the more technical data analytics part. A lot of business knowledge in our backpack, which we can use during our projects at customers. I started at TriFinance 13 years ago, already in that transition and support unit, where I did several finance-related projects, treasury, controlling, accounting, different topics, but always with the angle towards data and reporting. And that's why I made the switch about 7 years ago to the data analytics team.
In finance and in data and analytics, you have two sides of your workday. Just a normal Thursday in October when you're not part of a podcast, what do you do today?
When I joined the data analytics team, I was mainly working actively on project building things in Power BI, usually starting with finance reporting and then going towards HR reporting, operational reporting, actually any reporting the business needs. Today, my role evolved towards more project management, doing business development, doing management of the team together with colleague managers. So it's a much broader role. From time to time, like actually the entire day today, I dived into implementation of Aimplan that we are doing right now. We're in the final phase. It was rounding or wrapping things up and finalizing the project. My agenda is very broad and very diverse these days.
So let's jump into the topic of today, which is governance. I was speaking to another company here just a few days ago. They had implemented Power BI a few years ago. They have a lot of people building different reports, and they started to grow their implementation, and all of a sudden they realized that this is a mess. What do you see happening with companies implementing Power BI without having a framework or structure around their implementation?
I think because Power BI grew from Excel in the very early days of Power BI with Power Pivot and evolving towards a separate product, it was always very close to the business and business users. And at a lot of companies, we see that it's actually replacing their previous Excel spaghetti, like often call it, and it's now turning into a Power BI spaghetti. What we see there is that governance is needed. Actually, governance was already needed when you were using Excel, but there it was more like, let's say, shadow BI, and the actual BI was done by IT. Now with Power BI, it's coming much closer together, business and IT. So there is, if you want to do it on a large scale and on a proper scale on corporate level, you need to have some governance at least. Rule of thumb that we always take into account is that we don't want to make it too heavy. We still want to have the end users the flexibility to use Power BI, to adopt it and to get to know it, because it's a tool which has a very low learning curve, definitely at the beginning to get started. So you always want to encourage people to start working with it. But for, let's say, a corporate layer of predefined reports, definitely governance is needed.
When it doesn't work, when you see companies kind of struggling in this area, which symptoms do you see in the organization?
Different versions of the truth, different data models with the V1, the V2, the V3, the V4, and so on that are put in place. No real security which is applied, so there's potential security risk as well. No real process on developing new stuff. Everyone has the freedom to do whatever, and if they want to take decisions, it's difficult to know or to take the exact correct report to take these decisions. So there's not much clarity, let's say. That's what we often see as a symptom. And that's where we also try to help customers with the framework that we developed. Framework is working around 4 big topics, people in the organization, to see together with the company who's working on BI, who's doing what. Processes, what processes are there in place, if there are any, but also the tools that are used and the data that is underneath. And usually we just talk with business, but also with IT and with the users of Power BI or BI in general, to see how they feel about BI in the organization. And we try to link it to the model we have predefined. And going from there, we start to work towards a structure with them that is suited for their company, but always with all the stakeholders that are required involved. So not only business, not only IT, but everyone who is involved.
And this is becoming kind of a very important topic. We see now the adoption of Power BI is just going through the roof. At the last FabCon conference in Vienna, Microsoft stated that it was 550,000 companies today running Power BI in one way or another. So for sure, there is a lot of companies struggling with these kind of questions. How do you balance this kind of self-service capabilities that you want to maintain and the central control that you also want to implement in this governance framework? What kind of, if you look at these 3 core pillars, what are kind of the steps and how do you think about this?
Good question. I think it's important to indicate or clearly indicate a set of reports that are, let's say, for corporate level and that are developed by a certain team which is central in the organization and which has the ownership, let's say, of management to build certain reports. And then within Power BI, there are different options and different levels depending on the skill set of the users to build their own reports on top of these validated data sets. So that's a first point. So ideally, you start from a validated data set. You can, of course, work on proof of concepts on separate environments to start developing things. But if you want to do ad hoc analysis based on the data set that is used for management, for example, you have different options. And the first one is that you use personalized visuals within Power BI. So that's a possibility in Power BI service where you can just drag and drop certain predefined fields in a different order. You can change from a matrix layout or a table layout to a line chart or a bar chart, for example. You can add some additional dimensions, but it's in a very much cured environment. You cannot do anything wrong. You can save the views you made as a bookmark and reuse them later, but it's very, very much cured.
So as an end user, you're just kind of looking at an existing report and then you customize and tweak that report.
Yeah.
But for sure, relying on the data in this central semantic model, which you have validated data. That's great.
Yeah. The next step, if you already have more experience with Power BI and you want to build really your own reports, then you can always connect towards an existing semantic model, which is validated, and build your own reports from scratch on top. ideally using the corporate template with the right colors immediately and so on. But then you have, again, more flexibility. Another step more in that is that you take an existing model and that you start adding your own tables, Excel files, for example, to it, and that you already do some data modeling yourself as well. And then the last part is that the main source of truth is not provided with a semantic model, but is in a gold layer in Fabric, for example, or in a data warehouse or in the lakehouse, where the data engineers or the data professionals prepare the data, and that you have the flexibility to access these tables and build your own data set on top of it. So there are, let's say, 4 different layers, more or less, related to self-service within Power BI, where depending on what your skills are and what you want to do, you can do self-service.
And when you talk about this semantic model, this data model, where you have brought in all your data in this big model, do you see that you split that into different areas, or kind of sales in one and you have your financials in another, and kind of break it out like that? Or do you build a big semantic model, maybe based on OneLake and so on?
That really depends on the size of the company. So we work for very small companies. We work for the large multinationals. Within the multinational, it's just not possible to put everything in one box, and you will soon lose overview. So there we indeed go for separate, let's say, pillars for sales, for HR, for finance. For smaller customers, we often start with one integrated model, and then we see, as soon as for security reasons or performance reasons, we split it at a certain moment in time. Why do we start with one big model? In small companies, there's usually 1, maybe 2 persons who are, let's say, the Power BI champions. So if they only have to do maintenance within one set, it's just easier for them. In bigger companies, you have someone responsible for the sales reporting, someone for the finance reporting. So there, the champion base is also more fragmented, and that makes it easier to maintain these separate models.
And these processes that you then put on top of these data views and technologies, when say that you want some new someone in the business want a new report, and you have a structured process for that, how do you control those kind of processes?
We work with kind of a light agile sprint way of working, where we have a predefined set of weeks, 3-4 weeks throughput time to do development, and there we always advise customers to have kind of a change request log or a backlog with tickets that can be an Excel file, but it can also be in Jira or in Azure DevOps or whatever platform that you want to use. And then at the start of every sprint, you sit together with the people who put in the requests, with let's say a board or kind of a committee that is that has the rights to prioritize everything, and then you just go through it together. Everyone who needs to be involved, business, IT, is around the table, and you just prioritize there. And there it can be very heavy, let's say, like in very big software implementation, but it can also be very light, just an Excel file with 10 requests. You put an estimate next to it, and you just get started. And then during that sprint, you regularly follow up on the progress and the validation and so on.
And how do you manage? I mean, nowadays you can start to manage source code. Kind of the Power BI project files are now possible to have under source code control. Do you see that happening right now, or is it something for the future?
Bigger customers, we do. Let's say the customers with a real advanced level of Power BI skills, they have really adopted it. They have their own team, and they have people really dedicated to building things. There we see it work. Definitely for the semantic models, for the reports, it's still not top. For the data sets, we see it work. Also because it makes it possible to develop more often already in Power BI service. We have one very big customer where it's just not possible to use Power BI desktop because the size of the data is too big. And there it's together with tools like Tabular Editor and so on, it's easy to work with Power BI projects with that source control, and to use the full capability of that. At smaller customers, we always try to go for a Power BI premium per user license, at least, if there is no fabric capacity or premium capacity available, because there you have the deployment pipelines where you have a separate development, test, and production environment, and there your source control is limited, but there it's more like using that pipeline and probably checking in a backup of the code in DevOps, but there we're not using the full potential because it's, as we are often coming in from the finance/business side, we see that for key users there, it's often too complex and going a little bit too much towards the IT side. So there, I think there will always be two tracks there, and I guess that the full source control will, once it becomes probably a little bit more user friendly, will be used by more and more people. But now I clearly see two tracks, with the more advanced users and, let's say, the business users, like the way I started, that start with Power BI, start to use it. Yeah, they just want to publish their data set to the cloud and start using the report like it is.
And so far we have talked about Power BI as a data analytics tool, kind of presenting your business data and bringing data from sources and up to the end users. With Aimplan, you're also an Aimplan partner, implementing Aimplan at different companies and customers. There you get the possibility to publish reports where end user can actually start to edit data and put in kind of targets and plan for the future and make comments, and you get another dimension to the way of thinking about how you control these reports. Give me some feedback on, or kind of how to think about that.
I'm really convinced already. Otherwise, we would not have become a partner, of course. But I also see it when I have discussions with customers and potential customers. What they really always see and like is the actual input in Power BI, that possibility. It has been a question that we got over the last years. Yeah, when can we add comments in Power BI? When can we start doing inputs? These things. So that's the first thing to convince them. Having a P&L view, having a balance sheet view where you can have your monthly comments and so on. That's really the first trigger often. And then we always go one step deeper and say, yeah, but you also have that budgeting functionality, and where in the past you used Excel files, tons of Excel files at a lot of our customers with, again, these version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. And okay, what is now the final version 1, 2, 3, 4? What is now the final version? There we can easily convince them to use Aimplan because it has more or less the same flexibility. You're using the validated data from your Power BI semantic model. You have audit trail, and which is very important, and a very good argument in our sales processes. You have some workflow possibilities, and you can immediately see the results in other Power BI visuals and reports as well. So that's very much added value. If I take a look at it more from a governance point of view, where I see the added value there is that at a lot of smaller customers, we often use Excel files for mappings of chart of accounts, for example, or of projects or of other topics. The data input flexibility of Aimplan, it's very handy to have that data input immediately in Power BI as well, instead of in separate Excel files. So that's very useful.
Talk about Aimplan and governance regarding Aimplan, where you can actually start to do budgeting and forecasting and adding comments directly into Power BI pages and report. That makes the world a little bit different when it comes to governance.
That's right. So where it was in the past only reporting and using the reports for visualization, there is an additional layer coming on top, which is the input layer, but which has a lot of added value. We already received questions from customers, let's say in the last 5 years. When can we start to do input in Power BI? When can we start to add these famous comments so that we don't have to always export our visuals to PowerPoint, write our own comments for the board, and then PDF them? Now we want to do it immediately within the tool because it has the flexibility of dragging and dropping and drilling. It's much more user friendly. So that's the first entry point often at customers, that we say, but we have the solution for that with Aimplan. And then we usually go a step further. You can make very nice P&L visuals with it as well. During the last years, we tried to develop our own setup for P&L, and it was okay, but not pixel perfect often, and not often as the CFO really wanted it to be. So he had his information in kind of okay structure, but not the perfect structure. And that's where we also see a big advantage of the Aimplan visual, that you can really customize it the way you need it, and that it's really ready for use by everyone in the organization. Adding the commenting feature on top of it makes it perfect.
When you think about kind of, I normally say that if you think about a Power BI report producing or showing data from different source systems, if you make something wrong there as a Power BI developer, for sure it can be a problem, but you can change it easily. You just do some changes and then you republish the report. It becomes a little bit more complex when you actually start with data that a lot of users are entering. If you have 200 budget users putting in their sales forecast for next year, and you have done some dimensional connections wrong, that's much more important to get right and to beta test it really carefully. How do you see that?
For sure. During the project I was mentioning in the introduction, I noticed this from time to time. I did some changes, and then the visual all of a sudden was not working anymore because there was a relationship broken, and you immediately see your figures splashed out or multiplied whatsoever. So there, I think it's important to at least have these deployment pipelines, so that you always have your development test production environment where you can see what the impact is of certain developments that you did. And then of course you have a decent audit trail in Aimplan itself as well, to see where things went wrong and where you can adjust certain records, so that you don't have to ask these 200 users to start from scratch, because that's definitely not what you want. And then of course we always add kind of a workflow on top as well, so that there's a final validation by finance, for example, if there are some issues here and there, that they can always do manual adjustments to get it fixed. So that's good point. That makes it more complex. Also security wise.
How do you manage that with row level security in normal Power BI, and what are you thinking?
In normal Power BI, it's often a combination of Active Directory groups with Excel input very often still, or a table which is available on the data warehouse. And there, the Aimplan with its data input visual adds again value. You can throw that Excel file away, and you have an input template for row level security with audit trail, so you can easily see who changed access rights of which person. We usually set it in a separate report, let's say, so that it's only available for certain admin users and not for everyone, of course. But that really makes it more professional again, more robust, and that's what we always try to aim for. We want to be pragmatic, but on the other hand, robust as well. So that's a very nice, their Aimplan and our way of working.
Yeah, we actually have customers buying Aimplan just to control their dynamic row level security model. So kind of a strange use case, but it's, instead of having a lot of spreadsheets floating around with those kind of rules, you manage it inside of Power BI. So that's great. If we're jumping back outside of the Aimplan world and talk about kind of Power BI and Fabric, do you have some real world story where you have a kind of company going from kind of spaghetti house to more of a structured process? One
example I often use, where I think we started at that company like 3 or 4 years ago already. It's a company in the telecom sector in Belgium, where they had a BI guy internally, but a lot of people doing their own things around. There were like 50 different workspaces in Power BI, even though it was not such a big organization, and everyone was using their own Excel sheets, which they took from the source system. Then they turned it into a Power BI model with often only one flat table, not even a dimensional model, and then some visuals on top of that. And the first thing we did was just making the backbone more robust. So we set up a data warehouse from scratch using the Azure technology, where we clearly defined with them, okay, these are the main KPIs which you want to report on. We're going to gather that data from the different sources, bring it together, and then we became the BI team. We are going to first build the first set of reports and data sets and then publish it. And then once that first project phase was wrapped up, we moved in towards the sprint way of working, as I mentioned before, where we had key users defined in every domain. We had, let's say, every 2 weeks, more or less, we had a meeting with them, and they started to add their change requests in, and we processed these change requests. And then since I think 1.5 years, there were some champions which we trained at that organization that started to become more and more mature, and that are now more and more taking over the Power BI part in the organization. They're still using the same process of change request, but they are now in charge, and we are there as a coach for the more complex things and for the data engineering part. But for the Power BI part, they are now running the business, and it was very nice to see how their learning curve really went up over the last years with our guidance, and that we're now, I had a steer call there earlier this week, where we were in the past, we were in the driver's seat of that steer call, now they are, and you really see that they have adopted Power BI. It's really their main tool in the organization, and they really managed to use it in a proper way. It's stable. It's used by almost everyone. So that's
if you would imagine that they would have just gone on and working the way that they were working and growing this implementation of Power BI, how would that look today? What risk do you see?
A gigantic spaghetti which would probably not be used anymore. I know that when we came there, the CFO said, yeah, I'm just using my own Excel files, which the controls are providing me because I don't trust the data. So they already had things, an environment where they spent quite some money because a lot of people were working on it, but it was just not used by the boards to take actual decisions. So I think it would still have been like that, everyone using their own Excel files. But also really helped there to convince them and bring everything together is work with a really decent data dictionary. They had a lot of complex KPIs which changed from time to time as well. So we really made a data glossary with Describe, a Belgian company, which is an overlay of Power BI, and that also really helped them to adopt it and to start using it, because they then immediately could see, okay, these are the validated KPIs. We're using that's the definition of it.
So when they talk about the gross margin, everyone agrees what is the gross margin? How is that defined? I mean, that the importance of knowing what you're talking about is critical.
Also, a lot of operational KPIs. So it really took some time to align these definitions, but that was one of the cornerstones of the success of that project, that we really took the time and really kept on hammering on the same nail to make sure that these definitions were aligned, and their buy-in from C-level was also very important, of course, to make it happen. But if we would have not set that structure there, then it would have just been a spaghetti, and they would just spend a lot more time on gathering their figures as well.
How about now moving forward here? We see that Fabric is coming very, very strong, and everything around that full platform. How will that change the governance of everything that we're talking about?
Again, a new challenge, I think, because it's bringing the data engineering capabilities much more close to the business. They can start doing their own things in Python or in SQL within the same environment that they already know, the Power BI environment. So there, I think, where in the past, let's say the data engineering part was more under the umbrella of IT, and they took care of the governance until or including the data warehouse, and then from there on, it was more, let's say, the business together with IT sometimes that took on Power BI. Now these environments are becoming much more integrated, so it's really important to align there again, and to also make sure that the security which is applied in Power BI, that it's pushed through with that OneLake more and more to the source, because people will start using raw data more often to explore because the technology is just there, and then building their own proof of concepts, which can then again be industrialized. I see a challenge there, but I think that it's also an opportunity. It's not only a challenge, it's also an opportunity to become data-driven as an organization.
All this talk about deployment pipelines and fabric, it might scare off some people from the business side. If you are in a small, mid-sized organization today starting with Power BI, what advice would you give them as an organization to get started in a good way with Power BI?
Start small with some small proof of concepts, and there you probably don't need these fancy source control pipelines. Start with the basic. Make sure you have a test environment, and as soon as you go to production, a production environment, but you can start very low key and just convince your end users first that it's an advantage and that they can get more out of that data. And then once you have the right advocates in the organization and it starts to live, you can easily start to implement as soon as you grow additional steps. I would not recommend to first implement an entire governance framework, which takes you half a year or a year, and then start with the reporting, because then the business don't see results. You're eating budgets. There's some guy doing something around BI, but they don't see results. So I think it's important to have a first result soon, which is of course decent and okay and set up properly, that you get some credits from the organization. If you're from the business side or from IT, it actually doesn't matter, but that you get some credits, that you then, together with the growth of the usage in the organization, that you also take into account the growth of your governance framework. It's important to do it aligned, let's say, and step by step. Don't forget that governance part, because that's often the case, that they just go and keep on going, but don't make it too heavy from the start. That would be my advice. I think it's always better to just start without governance than to not start.
But be aware that if you don't start to think about it, will hit you later, for sure. Evert, this has been a great discussion, very practical, clear, and very relevant. Our listeners would want to learn more about Power BI governance or TriFinance framework. Where should they go? How do they get in contact with you?
They can reach us via the website, trifinance.be, where we have a dedicated page on our data and analytics offering, so they can get in touch with you guys, and then you can forward them to us. They can contact me via LinkedIn, so different ways of getting in touch. But I think the easiest way is via our website. There is also a contact form there, and then you're coming to me and my data colleagues.
That's great. And for our audience, don't forget to subscribe to the Power BI Edge podcast for more real-world stories and how organizations are using Power BI and Microsoft Fabric to plan, forecast, and report smarter. Thank you, Evert, and to the audience, thank you for watching. I hope great value from this episode. See you in the next episode, and take care, everyone. Thank you, Evert.
Thank you very much, Erik, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.